back to San Francisco.
Mr. Adam, I'll have you know, I don't take money from no strangers. The shame of you talking like that in front of himself.
I only meant...
I've got an idea what you meant.
Bonanza ended on January 16th, 1973, with a shocking final episode where little Joe for his life from a deranged killer, a far cry from the warm frontier stories fans had loved. After 14 seasons dominating television, the show closed its curtain with fear, mystery, and a chilling sense of unfinished business. What pushed Bonanza into such a dark twist?
Now, I was watching these men and their interest in your culinary arts.
Watch your tongue.
Would you feed them for, say, $1 a meal?
At $1.50, I would.
And why did this disturbing finale become the moment it truly died? Join us as we unveil every moment leading up to the final scene that took Bonanza off the air for good. America's unshakable Western empire. Did you grow up with Bonanza always playing in the living room? A lot of Americans did. For 14 seasons straight, this Western sat at the very top of television, bigger than anything else in its lane. There were 431 episodes, which is almost 3 times what most shows ever manage now. It was not just something people watched because it was on. It shaped what American entertainment looked like for an entire generation. When Bonanza first arrived, folks were already swimming in Westerns. Every channel you flipped to showed cowboys riding across dusty towns, firing pistols and settling scores. Gunsmoke was pulling in huge crowds. Wagon Train was doing the same. Movie theaters were packed every weekend with Western adventures. It felt like a stampede of the same thing. Most of those shows burned out fast. A few seasons, then gone. So how in the world did Bonanza stick around when so many others disappeared? That answer caught Hollywood off guard. Bonanza pretended to be all about the Wild West. Sure, horses were galloping across the Ponderosa, and there were plenty of gunfights. But the real story was the Cartwright family. Ben Cartwright, played by Lorne Greene, stood as the strong father figure. He had 3 sons, each one different from the next. They spent their lives protecting their land and each other. You'd think that would be simple, but it wasn't simple at all. The genius of Bonanza came from how it turned family into the biggest adventure of all. Each son had his own spirit, his own problems, and his own dreams. Viewers weren't just watching trouble ride into town every week. They were watching a family learn and fight and heal together. They saw love, jealousy, fear, sacrifice, and all the messy emotions real families wrestle with. People tuned in because they cared what happened to these characters. That was not something Westerners usually did. Most shows in that genre focused only on saloons, gunsmoke, and bad guys getting thrown in jail. Bonanza gave you a chase scene one moment, then a quiet talk between father and son the next. You would laugh at one of Hoss's jokes, then feel a tug at your heart a few minutes later. This mix of action and warmth kept people glued to their screens year after year. It felt real, or as real as television could get back then. The actors became giants in pop culture. Pernell Roberts played Adam Cartwright, the oldest brother. He was the brainy one, confident and calm, the kind of man people admired. Women swooned over him. Men tried to copy him. He could talk Shakespeare while showing a villain the business end of a rifle. Roberts gave Adam so much depth that he jumped off the screen like a real person. Then came Dan Blocker as Eric Hoss Cartwright. One look at him and you knew he was built like a mountain. But Blocker filled the character with kindness. Hoss could chase down an outlaw and still be gentle enough to cradle a stray puppy. He became the lovable heart of the show. Even today, folks who never watched a full episode know the name Hoss Cartwright. That's how powerful Blocker's presence was. Michael Landon took on the role of Little Joe, the youngest Cartwright son. He brought a fire to the show that no one else could. Little Joe was always jumping into action, driven by passion and instinct. Landon clearly enjoyed every minute playing that role. You could see the excitement in his eyes, always ready to charge into the next situation. Viewers fed off that energy. It gave the show a spark that never faded. There were other important faces, too. Victor Sen Yung played Hop Sing, the cook who always kept the family grounded. and the show was like a magnet for stars passing through. Yvonne DiCarlo, Leonard Nimoy, and many others made memorable visits to Virginia City. Every time you tuned in, you wondered who might show up next. The success was wild and lasted an unbelievable amount of time. Bonanza ran from the year 1959 all the way to the year 1973. It survived actors leaving, money problems, and changes in what audiences wanted to watch. Decades later, the episodes still play on multiple channels. You can stream them, buy them, or spot them in classic TV collections. Many fans still call Bonanza one of the finest American shows to ever hit television. But there was a side viewers never saw. While people at home enjoyed the stories week after week, trouble was constantly boiling behind the scenes. The main cast dealt with personal frustrations. Writers argued over creative choices, and real tragedy slammed into the show more than once. It felt like someone was always putting out a fire just to keep the work going. Thinking back on all of it, it is kind of a miracle Bonanza survived as long as it did. The problems started early, and they never truly stopped. But the Cartwrights kept riding across those Nevada hills, giving families across the country a reason to sit together and watch. But one actor's hatred would crack the foundation first. The star who hated his own success. Pernell Roberts didn't just dislike Bonanza, he hated it. He hated it so much that it shocked nearly everyone who worked with him. While millions of Americans tuned in each week to watch him as Adam Cartwright, Roberts was counting the days until he could walk away for good. He never hid how he felt. He talked about it all the time. Roberts came from serious theater. Before Bonanza, he'd performed Shakespeare and trained in classical acting. He wanted to do meaningful work, the kind that challenged him and earned the respect of critics. Instead, he found himself trapped in a television western. To him, the scripts were dull. The characters felt flat. He once called the show banal and meant every word. Roberts thought Bonanza got worse with every season, repeating the same stories with no real character growth. Week after week, he showed up to play a part he didn't believe in. His frustration spilt into his relationships on set. The other cast members knew he didn't want to be there, and it created tension. It's hard to work with someone who openly disrespects the project everyone else is trying to make succeed. The energy on set changed. People could feel the divide. Roberts also criticized the show's lack of diversity. He pointed out how few roles went to non-white actors or how rarely those characters got any real depth. He wasn't wrong. Television in the 1960s had a long way to go. Over time, Bonanza made small improvements, giving more screen time to minority actors, but by then, Roberts had already lost faith in it. In the year 1965, he finally quit. He walked away from one of the biggest shows on American television. No grand farewell, no final episode for Adam Cartwright. He simply vanished from the story. One week he was there, the next, gone. Just like that, the oldest Cartwright son disappeared from the Ponderosa. It should have been a disaster. The entire show was built around the bond between a father and his three sons. Losing one of them felt like losing a third of its heart. The network panicked. Producers scrambled to rewrite scripts. Everyone wondered if Bonanza could survive without Adam. But something unexpected happened. It did. The ratings dropped at first, then found their way back up. Audiences slowly accepted the new version of the Cartwright family. The writers adjusted, focusing more on Ben, Hoss, and Little Joe. They introduced new supporting characters and found new ways to keep the stories alive. Bonanza kept going, even without the actor who'd tried to bury it. Still, you could feel Adam's absence. The quiet intelligence he brought to the family dynamic was gone. Before, each brother had his own place. Adam was the thinker, Hoss the heart, and Little Joe the spark. Without Adam, that balance shifted. The show leaned more heavily on humor and emotion, which gave it a slightly different feel. Then came the twist. Dan Blocker's character, Hoss, started to shine brighter than ever. Before Bonanza, Blocker had done some theater and smaller film work, but nothing had shown what he was truly capable of. As Hoss, everything about him clicked. the kindness, the humor, the big-hearted strength. He became the emotional center of the show. Viewers adored him. Kids wanted to grow up to be like Hoss. Parents saw in him the perfect mix of courage and gentleness. Even people who'd never watched a full episode knew who Hoss Cartwright was. That kind of recognition can't be forced. It happens when a character feels real. Losing a lead actor from a family drama usually means the beginning of the end. But not here. The cast pulled together. The writers found new angles, and the audience kept tuning in. Everyone involved learned something important from that period. Bonanza wasn't just one actor, or even one character. It was an idea. It was the bond between the Cartwrights, the mix of love, loyalty, and struggle that people connected with. That foundation was strong enough to handle change. By the time the dust settled, Bonanza had proven it could survive almost anything. Pernell Roberts had left, but the show carried on without missing a beat. And for everyone watching at home, that was the moment it became clear Bonanza had outgrown even its own stars. Then tragedy struck in a way nobody could have predicted. The death that broke America's heart. May 13th, 1972. That was the day everything changed for Bonanza. Dan Blocker was gone. He was only 43 years old. It happened so fast, it barely felt real. He went in for gallbladder surgery. Nothing major, just a routine operation. Then things took a terrible turn. A blood clot traveled to his lungs. The doctors did everything they could, but it was over within hours. Just like that, the man who'd played Hoss Cartwright for 13 years was gone. The cast was crushed. They'd worked together for over a decade, long enough to feel like a family. Whatever tensions they'd had in the past didn't matter anymore. Michael Landon broke down when he got the call. Lorne Greene sat in disbelief. Crew members who saw Blocker every single day stood around the set in silence. Nobody could process it. He'd always seemed so strong, so full of life. Then suddenly, he was gone. For the audience, it was like losing a friend. Hoss Cartwright wasn't just a TV character, he was part of their homes. Families gathered around the screen every week, laughing at his jokes, rooting for his kindness to win out. He wasn't the tough cowboy stereotype. He was the good heart of the show. Parents wanted their sons to be like him. Kids saw in him a hero who was both strong and gentle. Losing Hoss meant losing the warmth that made Bonanza special. The producers had no idea what to do next. How do you handle something like that? A death that's not written in the script, but happens in real life? American television had never faced anything quite like it. They couldn't just replace him or write him off as having moved away. That would have been cruel and false. So they decided to be honest. They let the show acknowledge Hoss's death. There was no dramatic scene, no tragic accident on screen. Instead, it was mentioned quietly in dialogue. The family spoke of him as gone, and the grief felt real because it was real. The actors weren't pretending. They were mourning their friend. It was a brave move, and it changed television forever. Bonanza became the first major American show to face the death of a main character head-on because the actor had truly passed. It wasn't just about storytelling. It was about respect. Respect for Dan Blocker, for the audience, and for the years they'd all shared. Pretending he'd ridden off somewhere would have felt cheap. The writers treated the loss with care. They knew Hoss wasn't just another character, he was the show's heart. Within the story, the Ponderosa felt quieter, heavier. Ben had lost a son. Little Joe had lost his brother. Every scene carried a shadow that hadn't been there before. You could feel the absence. But here's what everyone eventually realized. The show wasn't the same without him. When Adam left years earlier, the dynamic shifted, but the heart was still there. When Hoss died, that balance was shattered. Watching the later episodes, you can sense the emptiness, the rhythm, the warmth, the humor. They all faded a little. The ratings slipped. Not a complete collapse, but enough to notice. Fans still watched, partly out of habit, partly out of love for what the show had been. Yet it was clear that the spark was gone. Bonanza had always thrived on the balance between its four core characters: Ben, Adam, Hoss, and Little Joe. Each brought something the others couldn't. Adam gave intellect and moral weight. Hoss gave laughter and kindness. Little Joe brought fire. And Ben grounded them all with wisdom. Now only two were left, Ben and Little Joe. Their stories were simpler, smaller. The emotional depth that came from having three brothers, each with their own view of the world, just wasn't there anymore. The writers tried to fill the gap. They introduced new characters, expanded side plots, and shifted focus. But it didn't feel the same. The chemistry was broken. Network executives saw what was happening. Bonanza had been a powerhouse for more than a decade, surviving cast exits, ratings competition, and changing times. But this was different. The loss of Dan Blocker had cut deeper than anyone expected. Without him, the show began to fade. Not crash, just quietly dim. Everyone behind the scenes sensed it too. The magic was slipping away, and there was nothing they could do to bring it back. Still, they carried on, filming one episode after another, knowing deep down that the end was near. There was no official word from the network, no farewell special, no grand finale in sight, just a quiet, uncertain march toward the finish line. The grief lingered both on and off the screen. For the cast and crew, every day on set was a reminder of what they'd lost. For the audience, every episode without Hoss felt like something was missing. It wasn't just the absence of a character, it was the loss of the heart that made the Ponderosa feel alive. When you look back now, it's clear that May 13, 1972 wasn't just the day Dan Blocker died. It was the day Bonanza started to fade from what it once was. The show carried on for a while, but the soul of it, the laughter, the warmth, the balance, was gone. And television never felt quite the same after that. What they created for the finale shocked everyone who watched it. Finale nobody expected. On January 16, 1973, Bonanza aired its last episode after 14 long seasons and 431 stories. The title was The Hunter, and it wasn't at all what fans had been expecting. Gone were the warm family moments and moral lessons. In their place was something dark, strange, and unsettling. A thriller that felt more like a nightmare than a western. The story started simply. Little Joe was making a delivery, the kind of thing a Cartwright could do half asleep. On the way, he met a man named Corporal Bill Tanner, played by Tom Skerritt. At first, Tanner seemed ordinary enough, certainly not the kind of villain Bonanza usually dealt with. He wasn't out to steal cattle or settle a grudge. He was something else entirely. Tanner was a psychopath. He hunted people for fun. No motive, no revenge, no money involved. He killed because it made him feel alive. When he saw Little Joe, he decided then and there that Joe would be his next prey. No backstory, no reason, just a madman who found pleasure in the chase. From that moment, the episode became a desperate fight for survival. Joe ran through the Nevada wilderness, trying to stay one step ahead of Tanner, who followed with relentless focus. Bonanza had done chase scenes before, but never like this. The tone was darker, the fear more real. It felt less like a western, and more like a horror movie set in the old frontier. Joe wasn't saving anyone, or defending his family's ranch. He was just trying not to die. Michael Landon directed the episode himself. He'd grown into one of Bonanza's strongest creative forces over the years, writing and directing some of its most memorable stories. But this one was different. The Hunter looked and felt nothing like Bonanza. It was stripped down, cold, almost detached. Even though the script reflected that shift, it ran only 39 pages long, the shortest in the show's entire run. Most Bonanza scripts had been at least 50 to 60 pages, full of dialogue, family warmth, and moral reflection. This one had little of that. It was built for speed and tension. When it aired, the reaction was lukewarm. Ratings were fine, not great, not terrible. Some viewers liked the darker tone. Others hated it, calling it joyless and unrecognizable. Critics didn't quite know what to make of it either. On its own, The Hunter worked as a tight little thriller, but as Bonanza's final episode, it felt hollow, like a goodbye that forgot to say goodbye. What's interesting is that the same idea would later appear in Gunsmoke's final season. Their episode followed a similar man being hunted storyline, and many fans thought Gunsmoke pulled it off better. They had more time to flesh out the tension and bring emotional weight to the ending. Bonanza's version, by comparison, felt rushed and oddly disconnected. The real problem wasn't what The Hunter showed, it was what it didn't. No, Ben Cartwright was reflecting on the family's legacy. No mention of the Ponderosa's future. None of the supporting characters appeared to say farewell. 14 years of stories, and the show ended with just one man running through the woods. After all the family moments, the triumphs and heartbreaks, fans were left without closure. Of course, back in 1973, most shows didn't bother with proper finales. When a series ended, it simply stopped airing. There were no final send-offs, no emotional goodbyes. That kind of closure didn't really exist yet. Still, Bonanza's ending felt especially abrupt. Viewers had followed the Cartwrights for over a decade, watching them grow, love, fight, and endure tragedy together. They deserved something that honored all that history. Instead, they got a manhunt. The episode ended as suddenly as it began. Little Joe managed to kill Tanner and survive. He returned home, alive but shaken. Then the credits rolled. No reflection, no final moment on the Ponderosa, just silence. For all the years Michael Landon had poured into Little Joe, this ending felt oddly detached, as if the character's spirit had been lost somewhere in the chase. It's strange when you think about it. Landon had always cared deeply about storytelling. He knew how to tug at the heart without making it feel forced. Yet this finale stripped Joe down to a survivor, running scared through the wilderness. It could have been anyone in that role. It didn't feel like Little Joe at all. You can't help but wonder what was happening behind the scenes. Maybe Landon wanted to try something experimental, a darker, more cinematic approach. Maybe the network pushed for more action to keep viewers hooked. Or maybe after 14 years, the writers were simply burnt out, unsure how to wrap it all up. Whatever the reason, Bonanza didn't get the farewell it deserved. And that's what makes The Hunter so haunting all these years later. It wasn't just a story about one man being chased, it was the story of a show running out of road. A series that had once celebrated courage, loyalty, and family ended with fear, isolation, and survival. When Little Joe looked down at the body of his pursuer, breathing hard, the audience could almost feel the exhaustion of a show that had given everything it had. Bonanza didn't go out with a warm family moment or a cowboy's sunset. It ended in darkness, in silence, and in mystery. And maybe that's why people still talk about it. It's not the finale fans wanted, but it's one they've never forgotten. But one thing became crystal clear after this episode aired: why this scene ended everything. The last shot of The Hunter showed Little Joe standing over Corporal Tanner's body. The madman was dead. The Cartwright had survived. Justice, at least in some rough sense, had been served. Then the screen faded, and just like that, Bonanza was gone for good. Why did that single scene mark the show's end? The answer isn't as simple as it looks. By that time, Bonanza's ratings had been slipping for years. The drop started right after Dan Blocker's death. He'd played Hoss, and losing him changed everything. The show that once ruled Sunday nights was now struggling to hold its ground. Younger audiences weren't tuning in, and westerns were starting to lose their grip on television. The world had moved on to modern stories set in cities, not ranches. The Hunter didn't stop the slide. It got okay numbers, nothing more. The episode didn't spark any new excitement, and it certainly didn't make NBC think the show still had life in it. Worse, it didn't feel like Bonanza anymore. Watching Little Joe running from a random killer felt strange, almost wrong. Fans who'd followed the Cartwrights for years must have wondered what happened to the show they loved. That episode exposed a deeper problem. Without Adam and Hoss, Bonanza had lost its heart. The magic had always been in the family, the push and pull between brothers, the wisdom of their father, and the warmth that came from that bond. When two of the brothers were gone, all that was left were Ben and little Joe. The stories became smaller, flatter, and less human. It turned into just another Western with horses and gunfights, and there were plenty of those already. Back when the family was whole, the possibilities were endless. One brother would side with another, leaving the third feeling betrayed. Sometimes, two would team up for an adventure, while the third stayed home to handle ranch business. They'd clash over right and wrong, or fall for the same woman. Every week brought a new dynamic, but with only a father and son, those layers disappeared. After 14 years, the writers had told nearly every story they could about that relationship, so they tried something new with The Hunter, a darker, riskier idea, and it showed just how far they'd drifted from what Bonanza had always been about. When little Joe stood over Tanner's body at the end, it wasn't just the villain dying, it was Bonanza itself. The show had survived one brother quitting, but it couldn't survive another dying. The family at the center of it all had been broken for good. Audiences knew it, even if they didn't say it out loud. When that final episode aired, there weren't any fan campaigns or angry letters begging for more. People had already said their quiet goodbyes months earlier, when Hoss vanished from the screen. The Hunter just made the loss official. Looking back, it's amazing Bonanza lasted as long as it did. 14 seasons, 431 episodes. It outlived most of its competitors. It endured changing tastes, cast departures, shrinking budgets, and the slow death of the Western genre. By any standard, it was one of the great success stories in television history. But even giants stumble at the end. The Hunter wasn't a bad episode. It just wasn't the right ending. Fans had earned something more than a random chase through the woods. They deserved to see Ben Cartwright reflecting on his family's journey, to get a glimpse of what the Ponderosa's future might be. They'd invested over a decade in these characters. They wanted a farewell that felt like a real goodbye. Instead, they got little Joe fighting for his life against a stranger who didn't even belong in the world Bonanza had built. It was raw, tense, maybe even well-made, but it felt hollow. The show that once stood for courage and kinship ended in fear and isolation. The final image, Joe alive, Tanner dead, closed one of television's longest-running shows, not with a bang, but a quiet, uneasy silence. The Cartwrights had survived just about everything: rustlers, storms, economic hardship, and personal heartbreak. They'd defended their home, helped their neighbors, and stayed true to their code. But the one thing they couldn't survive was real life creeping in. Actors leaving, tragedy striking, the world moving on. Maybe that's why the ending hits harder than people expect. When you watch little Joe standing alone in that clearing, you can almost feel the weight of it all. The space where his brothers should have been, and the fading legacy of a family that once ruled the frontier. Ben was old. Hoss and Adam were gone. And even though the Ponderosa would live on in reruns, the story itself had ended. Bonanza still stands as one of America's most beloved shows. Every episode can still be found on streaming platforms or cable reruns. New fans discover it every year, decades after the last gunshot echoed across the screen. That lasting love says everything about the power of its storytelling, the strength of its characters, and the performances that made them unforgettable. Yet, that final scene in The Hunter will always feel incomplete. It didn't kill Bonanza. It only revealed that the show had already lost what made it great. The real death blow came when Dan Blocker passed away. The Hunter was simply the moment everyone realized it was over. Bonanza didn't fall in battle, it just slipped quietly into the night, leaving behind the sound of a lonely wind blowing across the Ponderosa. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, leave nice comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting content. Check out another interesting video by clicking on the video appearing on your screen right now.